Welcome back to the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. We have a special guest host today. It's Pras Subramanian from Yahoo Finance, our good friend. He's been a co-host before. Welcome back.
Thanks, Greg. It's really great to be here. I love being on the show.
Got a great show for you today. Lots of things to talk about. Lots of news in the car world and the world in general. Pras has been driving some pretty cool cars. I just got out of a Jaguar F-Pace SVR. I've talked about that on a few shows, so I thought, hey, let's see what's been in Pras's garage, if you will, lately. And thankfully, he's been driving a Taycan and a Cadillac CT4 Blackwing, so we can riff on that. We'll run through some news, and we'll close things out. We have just a little bit of a feature here. Pras also sat down with Carlos Tavares, who is the Stellantis CEO. Interesting fellow. He's been around a lot, a couple of different automakers, Nissan, and so forth. So I've interviewed him over the years. I'll be interested to hear your take on just, where they're at and what they're doing, because obviously Stellantis has been in the news for a variety of reasons lately. So yeah, how you doing, man? Welcome back.
I'm good, man. Keeping busy. 2022 has been a lot going on with all the auto stories and EV stuff and component shortages and chips and this and that. So we've been pretty busy here at Yahoo Finance, but, still taking the time to hop in some cars here and there, try to do the fun stuff too, but it's been really busy.
Yeah. Yes. New title for those of you who follow Yahoo Finance. Pras is now the senior autos reporter. Did I get that right?
Yeah. So Greg, I was doing auto stuff since around 2015, 2016, but also splitting that with video content we were doing for business news and Yahoo Finance. And now I'm with everything that's been happening with the focus on the EV wave, the transformation. My editor-in-chief, Andy Sorber, decided we need to really focus on this full time and really hit it hard. So I was glad to make the move. I was very excited for it. So we'll focus a lot more on EVs and stuff, but also just the auto and mobility space in general. So still sticking to our fun ICE engines and things like that. So we'll be covering the gamut here.
Sounds good. Well, let's talk about what's been in your driveway, so to speak, recently. You were in the CT4 Blackwing. This is one of Cadillac's, call it a super sedan. It's got plenty of horsepower. I drove the CT5 Blackwing last fall. I'll be interested to hear your take, because I haven't been in the 4. It's a little bit smaller, little bit of a different strategy there. They're focusing a little more on kind of the handling, less on just the raw power, even as I believe the Blackwing engine in the CT5, whereas this is a little bit of a different approach. But I'm curious, what did you think? What did you think about it?
Yeah, the CT4V has this Cadillac exclusive V twin or twin turbo V6. Around 470 horsepower. It definitely did the trick in terms of the car is very fast. Now, Greg, I'm curious about you, because I'm sure the V8 sounds a lot better than this V6 did. It was a little bit muffled, and Cadillac, they could do a better job with that sort of the drama of the sound. But the actual CT4, the chassis is excellent. Nice size, sort of like BMW 3 Series size. What I loved was the fact that it comes with that 6-speed manual with your rev matching, and also your no lift shift. I didn't do that, but really great feeling shifter. I liked the clutch action. It was nice and soft. For me, hey, I don't need like a race clutch, right? So this is fine. And the one thing I will say about that is the car also comes with adaptive suspension, that MagneRide 4. That is incredible. I was upstate and hitting some roads that were kind of potholy and hitting some cracks in the road. And I think I had in the softest setting, it just absorbs that, but still keeps you planted. It really is a great car that Cadillac has put together. I think that package with that V6, that twin turbo V6, the suspension, the rock solid chassis, it's great, and it starts at $59,000. So you really can't go wrong, I don't think, if you're in that market for something like that, in that luxury sports sedan area.
I think it's a good value, especially if you're looking for something that can be more of sort of the athlete of the group. General Motors and Cadillac in the last, I'd say 15 years or so, they've been pretty dialed in with their chassis technology. They've been, I would say, I put them almost in the bucket of being one of the more technical, even sophisticated as far as their suspension tunings and technologies. Because, I mean, they give you a lot of different things you could do. They're very capable cars. They've tried to sort of cultivate, I think, an image as almost being like kind of race bred, to use that cliche. But I mean, they're sporty cars. For a while, I thought some of their interiors were not where they should be. But I mean, if you're basically an enthusiast, these I think really are kind of they offer you something, that's for sure. They have character, they have gusto. I give them credit too for trying to grow sort of the performance wing of who they are and what they do. For a long time, it was like the V, and I think that actually held up pretty well over the years. Now they've watered down isn't the right term, but they have changed the meaning, I think, on what V means. It's definitely more of, it can be a variety of things, but Blackwing is sort of what the old V was. So, I don't know. We'll see if that resonates with like sort of that luxury enthusiast niche. But, to answer your earlier question, the Blackwing with the big V8, that's 668 horsepower with that exhaust. Whew, that makes some noise. That sounds pretty good. I mean, I am very excited about the oncoming electric vehicle revolution that's basically here. But 6.2 liter V8 does sound pretty damn good. Let's put it that way. It can be a lot of fun to drive.
And so just real quick, I guess we're watching, this is the swan song, right? For GM's or sort of Cadillac's, V8 blowout, right? I mean, this is sort of it before it all transforms into the Lyric and everything like that, right?
Yeah, this is it. If you want a, large displacement engine with a lot of power and you like 8 cylinders, now's the time. Get in, the doorman's closing things up. You got to kind of get in while you can. So, I don't know. I think it's definitely an interesting proposition for them to again, try to like be almost like a cool brand. I don't know if you can necessarily do that when you're Cadillac and you're sort of the definition of old money, right? But I mean, you can drive the wheels off these things, that's for sure. So,
yeah, I was going to say real quick, my first car was my dad's '84 Cadillac Seville. So I have a soft spot for the brand, just sort of like wanting to see about how many comebacks have we seen, right? How many restarts we've seen the brand sort of like try to make it so relevant. And in here, it's like, right, we have this amazing performance car, gas power, but that's going to go away. Sorry. So just another thing that,
that's an '84 Seville. Wow. That's a large car. That is, I mean, it's funny. We've done long podcasts on like where Cadillac is and who they are. And they're like, pick like whatever arena you're in, whether, it's like the Yankees or the New England Patriots or like, whatever, the Boston Celtics, like whatever sort of sports or, whatever genre. There's certain brands, teams, people that just, whether they're good, whether they're bad, people are always interested in them. So, and I feel like Cadillac is sort of in there, and we'll see what they can do as far as like their finances. And they've done some kind of weird things in recent years too, like moving their headquarters to Soho, which is a very nice headquarters. They used to throw the best New York Auto Show parties. So those were great. But so we'll see what the future holds. I kind of like the CT5 Blackwing, to be honest. I like all that power and kind of like a bigger footprint. I like that, but the CT4, I mean, that's like kind of European Nürburgring kind of like, fighting. So did you do anything fun with your CT4 Blackwing?
We went upstate for a couple days. So the first day I drove up there, great sunny weather, perfect conditions. This car was on winter tires too, up here in New York. Then on Saturday, it snowed like a ton. Luckily, it sort of all melted by Sunday. But I had no real problems with winter tires. A little snow here and there, but it was fine. And put in there the wet mode or whatever you want to call it. And it did the trick. And it's a car that you can live with. I think that's the thing. Maybe Greg, you probably with that CT5V even more so. It's very livable. You can keep people in the back. It's actually a car you can use. And I think that's sort of one of the lasting appeal. I'm curious, Greg, because I think I got to get in the CT5V. I got to get into that. Check out that engine. I mean, it seems like it's one of these, world beaters, right?
Yeah, it definitely. I mean, the raw numbers are there as you would expect, but it's it's a very like emotional, visceral experience, if you will, when you get behind the wheel, and I drove this. So it was kind of very tail end of fall, right before things started to get kind of gnarly out here. It was a beautiful day, and the car was still on like the performance tires. And I accidentally made a couple wrong turns. I was in this kind of like group test setup west of Detroit in Ann Arbor, actually. And I actually was driving through downtown Ann Arbor somewhat inadvertently in it, which is it's kind of a college town. And I'm like, this is not the place you want to be driving this loud, large car that is a little tough to maneuver, if you will. But then I was able to get back on the expressway and kind of open it up. And yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun to drive. Let's put it that way. And it's pretty practical. The only part about that the Blackwing can sort of cut things down a little bit is you can get some of the very sporty seats. So, you're cutting down a little bit of that usable interior of sort of a, good mid-sized sedan when you have like, the performance seats, they're not quite as large and comfy as say like a 5 Series or a 7 Series, not in like an M trim or something. So, I mean, I give the car high marks. I think it's something that, if this is what you want, this is your flavor of brandy, by all means, it's here for you.
Yeah, I gotta say this real quick. The interior, I didn't have any problem with it. I thought it was very nice. I like the digital display in the cockpit. I thought they did a great job with when you toggle the different modes. I liked that clear layout. It's a nice place to be, unlike like I said, past Cadillacs where you kind of grin and bear it. I thought this was great.
I think GM is actually starting to kind of get their interiors right. You're seeing it in some of the Chevys, some of the Cadillacs. I think are the two areas where I've been noticing it more, just because they're the cars that tend to go through the press fleet more frequently. But yeah, I mean, it seems like they're kind of making good materials look good, and like even making lower trims still look pretty respectable. In the past, you would have an expensive Cadillac that didn't look expensive. Now it looks expensive, and I think that's the whole point. Yeah, so it's definitely an interesting chapter, the final chapter for ICE powertrains here for Cadillac. But I mean, definitely going out with a party. Let's put it that way. So now you sort of the opposite end of the spectrum, electric sports sedan, the Porsche Taycan. I have not driven the Taycan yet, so I'm very interested to see what you think. A lot of guys on staff have, and it hasn't quite made its way over here. What did you do with it? How do you, what are your general impressions?
Yeah, so initially I had been driven around in the Taycan Turbo and Taycan 4S with like race car drivers and things like that. Even on the I did one time do the hot lap at the Red Hook Formula E race with that car, and it was insane, right? It was just mind-blowing power. The chassis was so rock solid, and it was just, I couldn't believe the performance of this car. So for testing it, I really wanted to wait for the base model, the rear-wheel drive base model. And I wanted to see how does that stack up to a Model S, right? So we're talking about a car base starting around $80,000 before any federal tax credits. And then the one I had was optioned up to about $115K, had extended battery, 93 kilowatt hours, things like that. Still not a 300 mile range per EPA. And when I charged up, it was getting around 260, 265. I drove it down to DC to visit some friends. They did a long road trip and also just some city driving. And yeah, I mean, it's what you expect, right? The interior was quiet. It felt comfortable. It has that sort of like, you still feel like you're driving a 911. So it's that same sort of, seating orientation with the wheel just right. So it feels great sitting inside it. One thing I got to say, with this base model was it wasn't as fast as I thought it would be. It actually, has good specs, but it's just not that super insane 600 horsepower, 700 horsepower turbo S model. And this is for a car that weighs 4,500 pounds, right? So this is still a lot of weight that needs to be shoved around. So yes, it drove fine. It was very capable. It had the oomph when it needed, but it didn't like blow me away. Let's say a Tesla Model S 100D back in those days, right? And even just sitting in the passenger seat of a regular, the Taycan Turbo, where it just was a rocket ship. But for $80,000 and maybe $100,000 ish. With some options that you like, it's a great package for if you're in that market. It looks great too. I want to say quickly about the charging though. This is the thing that I think most people want to know about. When you travel on a long road trip, you're not using Tesla's supercharger network. It can be a little tricky trying to find those Electrify Americas that Volkswagen and Porsche are working with. Had to do EVgo, had to do another one, I think, ChargePoint. Trying to find them and then say, oh, by the way, the prices change varied based on location, and the speeds obviously change. So I charged at my brother's place, and it was getting like trickle charging, 8 miles a day, it's like that. I had to go to a grocery store, plugged in there, did that whole thing. My girlfriend was all concerned about, are we going to make it? All that stuff. So you have that to deal with. And it's still not perfect from like a livability point of view. Even on the East Coast, Greg, I'm not sure how it is in Michigan, but we have, I think, still a long way to go for these non-Tesla cars to feel fully comfortable driving around.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, when you look at probably some of the solid places for charging, for charge points, charging locations, you have the East Coast, you have California, probably Oregon a little bit too. Michigan is somewhat built up because it's, there's just a lot of suppliers. And of course, the Detroit 3 are here. So you have a pretty good infrastructure. There's a lot of, people driving electric cars around here. And then I think the farther away from sort of these, touchstones of electricity, if you will, that's where I think it gets tricky. I had a Mach-E a few months back, and the Ford app that they give that comes with the car, if you will, is pretty good. It can identify a variety of things. It can tell you what's going on with the car, so you sort of know where you're at before you leave. You can sort of almost schedule where your charging, location and time is going to be required. So that's good. I don't know. To me, that's just the biggest hurdle right now when it comes to electric vehicles. Is they need to be more ubiquitous charging stations, and if you're not willing to buy one or you can't buy one for your house, then you're sort of at the mercy of what, is essentially public infrastructure. And that's tricky. So, for me, wouldn't be that big a deal. If I ever had an EV, I would just probably go ahead and buy a charger, whether it was some like one off of Amazon or the one that was sort of came with the car, if you will. So we'll see. I think to me, that is the next big hurdle. If I were looking to try to make money in the car sector, I would say, what's an area that needs help? This is probably it. It's the biggest one, I think. So,
Greg, we had a company called Wejo on our air a while ago. They sort of advise governments and companies on where to put EV charging locations based on their data that they collect off all these cars. And they had to deal with Palantir to kind of really supercharge that data and here's where you should be. We asked the Wejo guy, I said, hey, so what would you tell companies, people, governments about optimizing EV infrastructure? Where should you be? And he basically just said, you need to charge at home. That's the main thing. Everyone needs to charge at home because that's where it's going to be the best place. You don't have to worry about having to, be on the road and finding something. That'll be, improving. But he said home charging that's where we need to be. And people like me who live in the city, greater New York City, I don't have a home to charge my car. So it's not realistic yet for people like me. But, if you ever own a home, it's a no brainer, right? If you can set it up cheaply.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see there's a lot of Teslas in my neighborhood, and some people, you can see cords running out of their garage.
Yeah.
They have the car, but their garage isn't clean or something like that. And I had last year I had the Mach-E and the ID4 in basically back-to-back weeks, and I was doing the same thing. I had we still had the Christmas lights up and things, so I had the boxes in the middle of the garage. So I'm running this extension cord, not an extension cord, but the cord that came with the the ID4 and the Ford Chargers. And, those sort of like the ones that the companies provide you with as a potential EV owner or a press reviewer, if you will, those will sort of trickle charge, like to your point. Like you can get a little bit of juice, but if you really want to do this, you kind of need to get like a fast charger or something. Yeah. So your car is ready for you, like a normal car. Otherwise, you just, in my mind, you have to think about it. You have to think ahead, which is something I'm not particularly good at doing. So, I mean, I would be the guy who would be like, oh, geez, I forgot to charge my EV. I can't make it. I'll see you later. I would be that guy, which is kind of a great excuse when you think about it. Yeah, geez, I really wanted to come to your event or your thing. I can't. My car only has 5 miles of range. Sorry. So I don't know. Maybe that's the next excuse, right?
I will say it is pretty. I like the feeling of charging at home. At my brother's place, even though it's getting not that much juice, it was nice to like sort of like I'm not going to any more gas stations. It's the car's charging at home. It's getting quote unquote clean power. Maybe it just felt. I kind of like the game of it too. There's a little game there, right? Where you go to a place, say, do you got a little place I can charge in the restaurant? Oh yeah, you do. Okay, click. So it was. It's a different lifestyle, and some people love it. They love the miserly nature of it, but for me, and these trips, long range, longer road trips, it's nerve wracking. So there's that balance.
Should we run through some news here?
Yeah, please.
All right, cool. Let's do it. Some news going on here in the car world, if you will. Last week, we got a good look at the Acura Integra. This was sort of the full first look here. If you're a fan of Autoblog or really any car enthusiast site, you've probably been waiting for this. You wanted to like dive into the specs and get all the official pictures and all that good stuff. For me, it kind of goes back a little bit to just where this, like what this means for Acura. It feels like they're really getting back into who they were, 10, 15 years ago with that sort of sporting ethos. You can get a manual transmission. That's part of the A-Spec lineup, which is cool, I think. I've driven a number of different Acuras, including the TLX in A-Spec trim. And I think that's a really nice treatment, sort of a good, middle ground between like basic Acuras and like the S-Type. So I think that's a good prescription for them. Same engine, otherwise 1.5 liter 4-cylinder, and then CVT transmission in some of the other trims. So, I mean, it sounds pretty good. It's in some ways a Honda Civic Si dressed as an Acura, but I think it dresses quite well. I don't know. I think in this day and age, I always think more is better as far as variety. If you're going to bring back a name, go for it. Let the market sort it out if it's, not going to succeed. But I'm feeling cautiously optimistic about the Integra. What do you think, Pras?
I think when I was younger, the Integra was a car that people loved, right? That 2-door manual transmission, but that the GSR and all those different variables of that car, people loved it. So I was surprised that it came out as a sedan as opposed to a coupe. But in the realities, like you said, in our market, guess what? If we're going to come out with a car that's not an SUV, it better be practical, has some practicality. So, all right, we'll bring back that Integra look, and the car looks sporty when we saw that yellow, cool looking prototype. So the coupe for me was a little surprising in the coupe, but I'm digging the fact that you can get that manual, and it comes with that limited slip differential, which is very nice, very sporty. And then also adaptive dampers too. I was surprised to read that you can actually get that. That's a huge thing. That really takes the Integra from a rebadged Civic to an actual performance car. And I think the proof will be in the pudding when you and I and other people take it for a drive. It looks the part. Maybe they will have a coupe at some point. Who knows? But I think that you're right. Like, why shouldn't Acura leverage these names that have such great name value, brand value, and look at Ford, with the Mustang Mach-E, right? They're doing that. They put it on a freaking crossover. So it's definitely possible that these brands can do that. And I think Integra it's a solid nameplate, right? And we want to see that.
What impresses me is that they're saying it's going to start around $30,000, which I think is very aggressive pricing, especially when you look at inflation and some of the supply constraints and just all the stuff that is going on right now. That's a very competitive price. That's almost like December 2019 pricing, like before the world went crazy.
I mean, we're in a world where 30 grand is like a deal, right? It's a bargain, you know?
That's a steal for a luxury car.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, with some performance chops, that seems pretty good to me. I think, so, I mean, I'm optimistic. I think you know, we'll see how like Acura, I think, as they start to look at like in Honda in a broader extension, like how do they start to pivot more towards electric vehicles? You know, what is 2025, 2030 start to look like for them? But, you know, like with the, you know, the Blackwings we were discussing earlier, it's like there's still a lot of really good, like kind of performance internal combustion things available right now that companies are still investing in because, you know, obviously the infrastructure isn't quite here. So until that time, enjoy your Integra. I'll be interested to see what the interior is like, though, with this, too. Our guy who got a little bit of kind of was read into it, so to speak, says it's very Honda Civic-like, which could be fine. Usually with some of the Acura performance models, like thinking back to like kind of my high school days and such and college days, it's like you didn't necessarily buy it for like the looks or the interior. You like those, but it was like the subtle tweaks they did to the suspension or the way the car handled. That's why you got it. So hoping Acura can kind of return to its roots there.
Yeah. So do you think it's kind of like this car that slots in below like the Type R, right? You were a Civic Type R, which is for the crazy, you know, boy racer enthusiasts, but then let's have a more adult car with some performance and practicality. Go to Acura, 30 grand. I mean, okay, that's a compelling package. I like that.
I agree with you. I think it's definitely a thing too, where like cars like the Civic Type R, maybe I'm just getting old here, but I'm starting to really feel like I'm moving beyond just the looks and even some of the severity of how they handle, you know?
Yeah, I can't handle all the little aero elements and all the stuff all over the place. Mm-hmm. It's just too, you and I can't drive that car around, Greg, you know? We're going to be rocking our Blink 182 and driving those cars around. It's like, it's too much, right? I mean,
yeah. The problem though is people start to think you're not being ironic. They're like, oh, look at him. He thinks he's cool in that car and he's wearing, you know, a Green Day shirt or something. And it's like, yeah.
The time machine.
You know, I don't know. Time machine. Yeah. So, you know, we'll see. You know, I like I said, I'm glad the name's back too. I like it when car companies do try to like play the heritage sort of, you know, vibe. And, you know, this isn't even that deep of a past. You know, we're talking about the Integra here.
Right.
But yeah, we'll see how it appeals. New generation of enthusiasts. And yeah, I mean, there's a number of cars out here too, like the Hyundai Veloster N, you know, that's another one that gets into that kind of like, you want maybe a more basic car, but it's kind of souped up, if you will, with its like some of the things they do. A lot of these are in that same kind of horsepower range too. So
and price range. I mean, right? The Veloster.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is like you immediately dump this into the bucket against like maybe the Golf GTI or the Golf R. You know, if you're sort of looking for mainstream cars that are, you know, dressed up a bit.
And you say these, you know, you're ticking off these names, and I'm thinking to myself, these are a lot of great options for car buyers, right? I mean, Veloster N, GTI, R32, the new Integra, like in that $30,000 sweet spot. Yeah, R32 is a little bit more, but like those cars are just really solid performance cars that you can have fun in, manual transmissions, right? Still can get that. It seems like now's the time, right? If you want a car like that, now's the time.
Yeah, no, definitely. What I always like about this segment too is you can kind of figure out how do you want the car to feel. You know, do you want like the GTI feel? That's a definite flavor. You know, do you want a Civic Si Type R? Come on up here. Look at the Acura Integra. I'm feeling like the Integra with the manual, that could definitely be something I could get on board with. I'm feeling like that could be something a little bit different, unique. You know, I'm, like I said, cautiously optimistic about that. But there's, you know, Veloster N, plenty of horsepower, a little bit more severe, manual transmission or the dual clutch, actually. You know, you can, like, that's like a double shot, if you will. You know, there's some variety in this sort of late stage, if you will.
Well, I had one quick thing. This weekend, I'm going to get the BRZ. Yeah. So with the manual, so another one, there we go. So I'll have to report back on that one.
We'll have to have you back on with that. The BRZ holds a a special place in my heart, if you will. We, when I was at Auto Week, this is probably 10 years ago now, we had a long-term BRZ. So we kept it for a year. And, at first it's the hottest thing. Like everybody wants the BRZ. Weather gets a little rough. At that point I was, more like the news editor, the web guy. The older guys, they're taking the Tahoes, the MDXs, you name it. And, the BRZ falls to the kid reporter, if you will. It's on snow tires. You'll be fine. I mentioned this last week with a couple of other cars from my Auto Week days, but it was great. It was fun to drive in the winter. That transmission, I'll be interested to hear what you think. I've always really enjoyed the Subaru 6-speed manual. I think it's a little rough, frankly, but I mean, it's engaging. Steering in that car, whew, I mean, you want to actually steer an automobile, that's the BRZ, right? So
I think is it going to keep the hydraulic kind of old school suspension? Or, I'm sorry, the steering. I have to look that up, but I remember it being very heavy in a good way, right? Felt great. Yeah. I'll have to see. I'll have to look into that, but I'm curious how it'll be this new update, right, to the old '86 BRZ, that dual model line. I'm excited. I mean, I'm to be honest with you, I'm kind of like excited about these. Mentioned these cars that are smallish and sporty, and I live in the city, and that's the kind of car that I'd want to have potentially as a weekend car. So we'll see. Maybe I'll be a BRZ owner after this.
That actually is a line I've heard from so many different like auto journalist types too, is like, man, if I needed to buy a car, or, and it works for like wherever you live, whether it's like your weekend car in New York or maybe more of a daily driver. It'd be a rough daily driver, but even if you live out here where the roads are a little more open in the suburbs, it could work for you. It definitely keeps you on your toes. It's fun to drive. I think it looks good too. Not everybody is with me on that, but I mean, classic coupe proportions, sure.
Cheap,
what's not to like?
Cheap and reliable. Yeah. I'll take it.
Yeah. What's not to like? So cool. All right. So a little more businessy. Tesla raised prices. This is twice in like a week. I think it speaks to the broader, economic pressures we're seeing. Chevy just did this with the Silverado too. For Tesla, they're a little less overt sometimes about their pricing. A lot of times I think it takes somebody kind of noticing, oh, hey, the Model S costs this much now. Wasn't it like $1,500 less last week? It was, Elon was lighting up Twitter. But to me, this is kind of like, it underscores the broader pressures that we're seeing in the industry right now. And I mean, even Tesla isn't immune.
Yeah, Tesla is they've been the kind of manufacturer that's just tried to keep their cars relatively reasonably priced given their costs and componentry. And like you said, they can raise prices dynamically on the website. You have no idea. You just go on, that's the price. Okay. And, just a couple of things, the cheapest car now, the Model 3 rear wheel drive, goes up to $2,000 to $47,000. That's your cheapest car before any tax credit. So that's not cheap, but it's not unreasonable either. Then you get into like the Model S variants are all up $5,000 a piece. The Model X up $10,000. I mean, those are like those low volume, high end cars. So it's still a lot of money. It's still surprising, but it's not at the same time. You can see buyers of one of those cars, they'll pay the price. One thing that's interesting about this is that, Elon had warned about, what component prices are affecting us and SpaceX. We need to adjust here. But I also think, Greg, there's a little wrinkle here. And I think that is demand soaring too for Tesla, right? With gas prices jumping, we're starting to see people think about EV adoption. We're looking into data about what kind of gas price will make you switch over to EVs if you're a traditional gas-powered car owner. And I think that another Electric was talking about how they have sources saying that they've seen a massive surge in orders across different parts of the country. So it'll be interesting to see when Tesla reports earnings in April. Are they seeing this massive interest that's coupled with the price pressures is making them, okay, we got to raise price across the board, but hey, is that affecting sales? Maybe not.
I think there's a bit of pent-up demand too for some Teslas. I think maybe people who in the last couple of years didn't get in, buy a new car for a variety of reasons. So I think, if anything, you could argue Teslas have been underpriced, might be too strong, but I mean, for as desirable as they are and for, the electric range you get, they've been very competitive. and they are something that I think they do have that halo of being something that is, again, desirable. You want to try to attain it. There's a level of aspiration there. And to me, they haven't necessarily played on that. The model, like the 3 and the Y, have been generally pretty reasonable. Now you're talking about getting up into the upper 40s. That does change the calculus. Although the average price of a new car earlier this year was something like 47, which to me is just mind-blowing. For years it was like 38.
Yeah.
Now it's like you're the average price of a new car. So yes, are a bunch of trucks and SUVs kind of bloating that? For sure. But still, it's a number we've all been looking at for years. And now you're telling me that's what it is. So, I don't think this is unreasonable. And I think it's, we'll just see. I mean, I think if anything, they're just going to make a little bit more money off of it.
An analyst, I think it was Morgan Stanley analyst, talked about how the recent surge in nickel prices meant that every EV would go up about $1,000 just based on the nickel prices alone. So it's not surprising to see these prices jump. But then also, to your point, Tesla sort of held the line with, you have like the battery and the motor and all other stuff that costs a lot of money from EV. And you're only tacking on 20 grand-ish more, right? Because they're able to control costs everywhere else. So it's really remarkable what they're able to do at scale for the Model 3 and Model Y in particular. And yeah, like I said, if a new car costs $47,000, I'm surprised that's actually the current price for a Model 3 rear-wheel drive right now. So that's remarkable.
Real quick, let's kind of tack on here the Ford Explorer chip shortage. That means they're shipping them. This is something we saw last year when the chip shortage was really the first wave of the chip shortage. I don't know. It was really severe. And they're shipping the Explorer without rear climate controls, which is a pretty big deal. I'm actually in our long-term Hyundai Palisade right now. And I'm surprised how much I actually use the rear seat controls. I need to turn it down for the family in the back, or, you have a passenger back there. The dog likes it's pretty cool because she's a golden retriever. And frankly, I think it's easier to go back there and do it. Just kind of turn the knob, as opposed to trying to wade through the dashboard and, different controls. So this is not nothing, I mean, I think we've seen things like stop start being pulled from cars. I was in a Tahoe about a month ago that didn't have it, didn't notice it until I was looking at the Monroney, and I was like, if I had bought this truck, it would have been something like $500 cheaper or $1,500 cheaper. Yeah. For some people, maybe you're like, sweet, I don't want stop start, or I don't need rear control. But this is sort of an ongoing, symptom of the chip shortage and, by further extension, the pandemic and all sorts of uncertainty we're seeing in the world. I don't know. Was an Explorer going to be coming to your press fleet anytime soon? What do you think?
Well, I have to sort of collect my thoughts here, because I wrote about this piece, and it was something that I think viscerally gets you, right, Greg? It's the fact that, what do you mean I don't have a rear seat climate control? Think about how many times you've been in the back there and it's a 90-degree day out. You're like, I need to crank up the AC. That's sort of a thing that people will want to do in the back. I've been in many cabs and Ubers, same thing, right? So you're taking that functionality away. Okay. Ford says they're going to restore that probably within the next year when they get the chips and the modules back. Okay. But it's still surprising that we're at this point. And I think it speaks to that problem that Ford's having, where you look at Ford Bronco is piling up at the factory. We need to get these things out. So instead of holding on to these partially built and undrivable units, let's sell those partially built and drivable units now, retrofit them later. And I think that's sort of this way, maybe Jim Farley and company are actually thinking about how are we going to just maintain sales and try to get through this. You mentioned GM and the Tahoe. I think, was it last year? They actually pulled that cylinder deactivation and the auto stop start because they didn't have the modules. And GM is not going to retrofit those. They're going to give you I think a $50 price break, but they're not going to retrofit that part. And like I said, most people we don't necessarily like auto stop starts, right? It's good for a couple of MPG, right? But typically it's more annoying than that. So I think this is a good move by Ford to try to get some sales here, try not to get completely slammed by this component chip crisis, and maybe the rear seating AC controls are going to pay the price. But I agree with you, it's not an insignificant thing, because it's a feature that many people use, including families, a lot.
I think it also shows just how hot the car market is right now, that I think the automakers are saying, hey, you know what? This isn't a make it or break it. We're going to ship it. People are probably still going to buy it. And then at some point, they'll probably remember to come in and get it. And if they don't, well, that's on them. Maybe they got a little bit of a better deal on their car. Maybe they didn't. It's kind of ultimately up to the dealer to, actually take the money off the sticker and, go ahead and bake that into the transaction fee. So it's not ideal, but from like the factory perspective, it's not the worst thing in the world because you're still selling the car. You're keeping your volume up. It's probably not hurting your margins too much, depending on who's paying for what here. The auto industry can be very tricky when it comes to like how much you're making on a per vehicle basis. Like some vehicles just, as long as the car isn't like totaled, you're going to sell it and make like a few grand when it rolls off the lot. Other things like the sedan segment, which is where you tended to see more pressures and why there aren't as many sedans anymore, much closer margins. So, we'll see. All right, moving on. We'll close things out here with the little segment here on you sat down. I don't know, did you actually sit down, meet him over the Zoom? I'm not sure how this worked, but you caught up with Stellantis CEO Carlos Tavares. He's an interesting figure. He's been around the industry a few years. Worked for Nissan. He held a ranking position there. He was basically right below Carlos Ghosn on the food chain for a while. And now he is the top man at Stellantis. Stellantis, I think, is an interesting position too. They have just the broadest spectrum of brands I feel like I've ever seen. It's like 3 different companies at once. But, first of all, so check it out. Interesting piece on our friends at Yahoo Finance. But, I mean, what are your impressions of this gentleman?
So, I had the opportunity to sit down with him in person. He was in New York. Was that last week or 2 weeks ago? Essentially, they had their Drive Forward 2030 plan that they revealed their kind of more information on their, $30 billion or 30 billion euro transformation to go EV, 25 new EV cars in the US, 75 across the entire fleet of their brands by, I think, 2030 or so. So we sat down with him in New York, it's myself and another journalist, and had about a half-hour discussion with him. And, we talked about a lot of stuff, but it started off with the component shortages based on Ukraine-Russia's crisis. He talked about that and how their employees that were in Ukraine were okay, and how that's, of course, impacting some of their production. But a couple of the bigger things that we talked about, and I think this was interesting, was part of the Drive Forward program was, as Carlos Tavares has been sort of skeptical on a lot of we can't push too hard into EVs because you don't have the right game plan in place. You don't have the infrastructure yet in place. How are we going to make money? And he admitted to the fact that, yes, we are using the ICE business to fund so much, if not all, of the EV transformation. We can't discount it. Here's the big thing. We can't be led by dogmatism when it comes to, hey, we need to go full EV right now. We can't, because he says, look, it's going to cost so much money for people to buy EV cars, middle class in particular. He's like, why can't I replace an older ICE car with a newer ICE car that has half the CO2 emissions per kilogram, right? Why can't, that's a good deal. I can make that. I can make that trade all day. Cheap car, better fuel economy, better efficiency, better from a exhaust point of view. Why are we not focusing on that in the near term while we ramp up? And I think he's trying to do that, but of course the market wants to see more change, faster change. And he made a little comment about Jim Farley and Ford about how they have their program with the new co versus old co situation, where you have the EV and the new businesses in one part and the old business in another. And he said that, quote, that was a very well played, very well received by the market. He found that as more of like a stock, not a stock pump, but more like the Wall Street is going to value your company higher because of this new structural change. We'll see if you can actually put out the 3 million EVs next year that you want to do, when everyone's searching for nickel, everyone's searching for batteries and componentry to make all these EV cars, let alone the fact that we don't have the charging infrastructure yet in place. So I think it was very real, very the reality-based conversation with him. He knows the deal, but he also knows that we got to actually use our ICE business to support this transformation. We can't cut the cord too soon on that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, the different approaches you're seeing among the automakers. Ford said, hey, we're going to carve out sort of two businesses. We were jokingly talking on this podcast a few weeks back how, like, boy, the earnings call for Ford when they actually start to report out these as separate is going to be very interesting,
Yeah.
like which one's making a ton of money, which one isn't. So there's that. I think they're pretty globally like well positioned. There's like they have so many brands, so much infrastructure that I think, especially in Europe, which is kind of a forgotten marketplace. No automaker outside of like the domestic to Europe automakers have ever been able to really do well there. Ford and General Motors never could really do it. Toyota, Honda have never really tried. It's a very unique, mature marketplace with thin margins, and they're one that's set up. And it seems like they also have a very like strong push towards electrification over there. So that's where I think Stellantis is strong. We'll see domestically.
A true global automaker, right? With operations not just in Europe and in America, but also in a place like South America too. The company is just everywhere, and I think. I believe Tavares was last at PSA, and then when they did the merger with Stellantis, he was ascended to the top, I guess. And so he's seen it all, and he kind of understands the realities of especially working in Europe with all the legislative requirements and how forward they are with the green transformation. Is I need to work with my unions, I need to work with my shareholders, I need to work with the governments to get all of it in place. And then I also need to work with places like the United States that have a different philosophy and timeline. So look, man, I would not be having a full head of hair here if I had his job, right? It's a lot of work and a lot of planning to do, and and a lot of money to spend. And it's a gamble, isn't it? I mean, it's a lot of money to spend on a future that we're not sure of yet.
I interviewed Tavares once in a van at the Work Truck Show in St. Louis a few years back. This is when he was with Nissan. And I was stunned because, it's like an auto show, obviously for work trucks, but there were like randomly these like high ranking executives would just kind of come out of nowhere. And the Nissan PR person was like, yeah, hey, do you want to interview our, like, I think he was like executive chairman or whatever his lofty title was behind convention. Yeah. I'm like, sure. Is he here? And, we did the interview in one of those like NV 200 or 300 vans that they were really big on. Vans are a big deal though for companies like Stellantis though. A lot of times they're going to be electrified even more. You're seeing that with Volkswagen with the Buzz. Vans are big business. I kind of digress here, though.
Yeah, no. You reminded me that the Stellantis deal for the EV delivery vans kind of hit Rivian stock because from Amazon was going to only use Rivian, and then they said, "Oh, we'll have a deal with Stellantis too." And it's like, whoa. So yeah, those vans are a big deal, commercial vans.
What do you think from I would say we're here in Michigan, we see the Chrysler side of it up close, and I think there's still a little bit of a tendency to think of Chrysler as a little bit of its own domesticated part, but there's so many brands here. And then when you take a step back, I find it tough to wrap my head around, as a journalist, around just all of these brands. You don't almost see that model, especially in the car industry, but really in that many industries in general, where Stellantis is borderline a holding company for all these different things. I mean, what do you think this is going to be Stellantis in 10 years? Do you think maybe they break up parts of it? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I mean, what do you think?
I mean, I think you could see I have no information on this at all, but I think you could see certain brands that push really fast in EV. Maybe they could be spun off as pure plays and unlock value. I mean, they've done that with Ferrari, right? They spun off Ferrari, made a lot of money. With regards to Chrysler, I think Chrysler is supposed to become an all EV brand, is what they were saying. But I mean, a couple of years ago, I was in Detroit, pre-pandemic at the auto show, and there was a lot of chatter of how that brand was going to go away. There was rumors that apparently dealers were chatting about, they had heard that this is going to happen. It didn't happen. And they're going to release that, I think it's called Windstar. I can't remember the name of it. The new Sea Breeze or whatever it's called, the new Chrysler EV concept that we saw. Forgive me for not remembering the name of that. But I think I was surprised to hear that they're actually going to try to revitalize Chrysler, a really old nameplate, like we said. But So I thought it was kind of going away. You had Dodge, all muscle cars, right? And you have Jeep that's really, and Ram that are the two profitable brands sort of propping up Chrysler and Dodge. And it sounds like they still want to keep those brands, and Dodge will have electric pony car, or what are we going to call electric sports car down the line. And of course, the real electrified Ram too. So it doesn't sound like they're going to get rid of these brands. And like you said, it's going to be a massive holding company. And I don't know if you'd see a Stellantis car, but I think you'd see a lot of sub brands and spinoffs maybe.
Yeah, I kind of wonder maybe 10, 15 years, like Fiat is in this enormous house of cards here. They get maybe spun out, or so, we'll see. I mean, it's interesting. Cool. So, any final thoughts, Pras?
It's the airflow. It's the Chrysler airflow. That's the EV concept, the airflow.
So the airflow was named after that concept from like the 30s or something, if I'm remembering right. And every now and then they dust it off, and it's just like, hey, let's bring it back. It's sort of like Lincoln will dust off the Zephyr or something, and you're like, okay, that's the concept. Good name. Where have I heard it before? Oh, right. The FDR administration.
Right. Has a little retro feel to it, doesn't it?
Indeed. I like it. I think it's kind of a good name for an EV, actually.
Cool.
Well, hey, that's all the time we have this week. Pras, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, sir. It was wonderful.
All right. Check out his work on Yahoo Finance. If you enjoy the Autoblog podcast, please give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Send us your Spend My Monies. That's podcast@autoblog.com. Be safe out there, and we'll see you next week.